Hello and welcome to day 4 in the Miss Mia Skadhauge Stevn case. This is a case about a 22-year-old nurse student who disappeared after a night in the town with her friend. A 37-year-old man is the defendant in this case. She was seen stepping into a dark car at around 6 in the morning, and this guy were picked up pretty fast because they had his license plate. What he probably didn't know at the time was his GPS system in the car. He tried to disconnect it, but it recorded the entire night. So we have a pretty good idea at where they went, and has explained why they drove around like they did and where they went and how it came to Mia losing her life. He has pled guilty to a count of indecent handling of a corpse, but I'll make a short recap if there's anyone new in this case. This is the city of Aalborg in Jylland in Denmark. This is the place he picked up Mia at around 6 in the morning. They drove around, talked. She was funny, she was a bit flirtatious, and then they went north and he told her about the time he was a soldier. She was very interested in him being a soldier and got very interested in him and wanting to do more for him. Then they went into this wooded area where firstly she gave him a hand job, but she wanted more and asked him if he was ready for it. They drove to another place in this wood where she left the car with her bag. The strap of the bag had been broken at some point of the evening, so she had tied it together so it was shorter. She ran in between some trees, fell over some shrubbery, fell down, and he said her neck made a strange movement. She was still making sounds, but not really conscious. He's trying to get her into the car to get her some help. He didn't want to call the police. He thought he could drive to the hospital faster than the police could come and help them. In the car, he is trying to make her squeeze his hand so she can communicate with him in that way because she's just moaning. And when she stopped doing that, he panics. So instead of going to the hospital or calling the police, he continues to this small town, Favnskjold. This is where his house is. When he comes home, he puts her in his bed. She is still moaning, according to him, but then she stops again. He checks her pulse. There's nothing there. He blacks out and then decides the best solution is to part her up so someone else can find her, so he couldn't get into trouble. And he makes a few purchases of caustic soda to to pour on the body afterwards to mask his DNA, and he decides because it's cold outside, it's probably frozen earth. So the smaller pieces I make her into, the better I can dig her down. After a couple of days, he has finished chopping her up and leaves her in this wooden area. He was soon arrested, and after the police told him, "We have the GPS data," he takes them into the wooded area and shows them the the graves he dug for her. That's his explanation. A strap around the neck and an accident. He didn't kill her, he didn't sexual assault her. It was all an accident, and the only thing sexual happening was the hand job. That's the defendant's story. We have heard from a dog, a police dog officer earlier who said, well, out in this wooded area down here, we found some clues, some evidence of what could have happened. It was somewhere along this road that in between the trees where he said that she fell, they found some nipple bandages, some tassels, and they have also found a set of keys and a hair elastic. Today there was another canine officer, and he said, well, we found these nipple band-aids, and there found some markings on the ground that could look like somebody been on their hands and knee, but they were very small and hard to see, so he couldn't say if it was anything like that. But more importantly, he said Mia's keys were 15 meters away from where these marks were, where she possibly fell and got her strap around her neck, according to the defendant. So it wasn't just because she fell over that her keys fell out of her purse. There was something else that made them do it, because there was 15 meters from the two sides. And he's saying there was no shrubbery in this area where she supposedly died, so she couldn't have fallen over that. And there was nothing indicating that she had fell at that location. Then there was a crime tech who was out there gathering evidence. He said there were no semen. They found some gaffer tape. They have talked a lot about this gaffer tape, and said that they found some pieces of gaffer tape they could see had been wrapped around something, but they haven't said anything about DNA or if they believe it's some way part of this case. And he told us that Mia's keys, which were 15 meters away from the point where they believe someone had been lying on the ground, between those keys and the hair elastic, there were 73 meters. So it's a long distance between those items. It's not just stepping out of the cars and running in between some trees. Then we had the guy who did the search for DNA and stuff like that. Mostly he was talking about they did a lot of testing for DNA, but we didn't hear much about what they found other than those nipple band-aids. They found the rest of the package at Mia's house, and the back part that makes it not stick to anything else. Those were found in her apartment too. The defense wanted to know if they tested how much force you need to rip them off, and he said, "Well, we didn't do that, but and I have no idea how much force you need to rip those off." But at a fireplace, or there has been a bonfire, they found the plastic parts of a saw like this melted. The defendant said he used a saw like this to dismember Mia. And the plastic part were found, not the blade, but the plastic part. They are called out to another area. That's the last part I showed you, just south of the suspect's house. And somewhere along these wooden forest roads, they had found two graves with the help of the defendant. And these graves were pretty shallow. There were two different sizes, but they found the body parts, or most of the body parts, in those. They had problems because he had drenched it in this caustic soda to try to dissolve any evidence of him. But in this area, they found most of the body. And the crime technician said that they found body parts for up to a month after the initial findings. The crime technician said the earth was easy to dig in. The only problem they had was because he had poured so many chemicals on the earth that it was hard to dig up. But they had two archaeologists out helping them to dig out the body parts in an attempt to show as much dignity to the deceased as possible. The next witness was the one who did the autopsy, and he came into some gruesome details. I won't go into all of them. I will mention some of the parts of it, but they didn't show any pictures in court either. They made a 3D model, so they didn't have to watch it, because it's safe to say if she's parted in so many pieces, it's not easy to look at. But he was asked about the defendant's explanation about the sudden fall and a strap strangulating Mia. And he said it doesn't match up with the evidence. The evidence we can find on the parts of the body we have, there are still parts of the body missing, shows indication that there has been a brain bleed. There's no blunt force trauma to the head. This brain breeze is an indication that someone had been strangulated or maybe had her chest compressed so much that you cut off the blood to the head, because that's normally why you see those kinds of brain bleeds. Normally you look for pinpoint bleeding in the eyes too, but they were ruined with the caustic soda that he poured on the body parts. His interpretation of the evidence was a strangulation and not some sudden strangulation, as he said, like you see it in the movies, but it just takes longer. 4 to 5 minutes strangulation that ended with her dying. That's what he believes the evidence pointed at. He couldn't be sure because the body is so damaged, but he said it's very highly unlikely that the defendant's story about a sudden snap and the neck is broken, that it doesn't add up with anything he found on the remains. There's again, the defendant had said that he didn't chop off facial features, and the evidence points in a different direction. It looks like things have been cut off too. So it's a pretty gruesome explanation. You can find them if you can read Danish or translate Danish. There's some newspapers who are a bit more gory than I want to be, but it's not a pretty picture what he's been telling us. His best opinion, he said, well, there might be some trauma to the neck, but we're missing parts of the neck, so I couldn't say for sure. But his opinion, it's a strangulation that happened to Mia, and he rules out the defendant's explanation. It doesn't make any sense according to the evidence you can find in the remains that they found in those two graves. Finally, he was asked if Mia had been drunk, and he said yes, she had a blood alcohol of 1.78, so she had been drinking, and it's also an indication that she died soon after leaving the town, because when you stop breathing, the body stops processing alcohol. So she probably died pretty soon after she was abducted by this man. Gruesome stuff. I'm sorry, I get a bit bogged up. And the last witness was just a GPS guy who told about the GPS was on all the time. So a pretty tough day in court. Very gruesome details came out. The evidence doesn't point in the direction of the defendant's explanation. It points in the direction of a guy or girl had strangled Mia. So the defendant's case is not looking very good right now, as the indication is that she was strangled and not just a sudden snap of the neck. This was day 4 in the Mia case. It was a tough one to get through, and I hope you bear over with me, and thank you very much for watching along.